we see a lot of even OG Bitcoiners talking about how, oh, look at these Bitcoiners simping for the government, central banks, please buy our bags, things like that, right? And even yesterday with the announcement of Mahler's new company with SoftBank and Tether and Cantor Fitzgerald, which is massive. I mean, I've seen people going, look, this isn't the Bitcoin I signed up for, kind of a thing like that, right? How do you look at that type of an issue?
The history of Bitcoin is a history of people trying to apply their own ideologies to Bitcoin, right? I think the cypherpunks, really, that was the ideology that birthed Bitcoin, but then the libertarians kind of came, and then you had the technologists, right? So I think you're always seeing Bitcoin as a battleground for ideologies. The current flavor in terms of how that's in the space today is that there are people who see sort of Bitcoin as this tool that can be leveraged by corporations and the government, right? So I think when you're seeing kind of, maybe you're talking about the old Bitcoiners who are sort of against that, right? What they're sort of rebelling against is that Bitcoin used to be this counterculture thing, right? It used to be very against the mainstream. Like, but I'll just give you an example, and Mark, you'll remember this from Bitcoin 2021, right? You were hearing at Bitcoin 2021 stories of people who were deplatformed by the government, people who were resisting governments, in foreign countries with tyrannical regimes. You had Ross Ulbricht's voice from prison, somebody who was literally being, buried alive by the state, would have died, in prison.
Yeah.
So people coming from that era, right? Bitcoin was a tool of resistance. It was countercultural. And I think the discomfort is, and I mentioned this word to you before we started, but the suit coiner, right? Yeah. This idea that Bitcoin is integrating into mainstream finance. And you're going to be sitting across from some financial planner, and this financial planner is the Bitcoiner, and that's how people are interfacing with Bitcoin. Is very antithetical to how those early adopters would have found Bitcoin. A lot of these people would have been, buying drugs on the Silk Road, or maybe even more extreme type things than that, right? This kind of radical kind of freedom money that they really saw as destabilizing states, right? That was a very attractive thing at the time. And look, as I said, I think I like to keep a view where I like that ideology a lot. I've learned a lot from that ideology. Does that ideology have to be right? I don't know, right? There's always going to be a group of people who want more freedoms. They want to move towards technologies that are radical and freedom, providing freedom to the world. And that's a great thing, right? Does that mean Bitcoin needs to kind of stay true to that or change? No, I don't think Bitcoin's any less of any of those things that we just discussed, right? So if you go back to 2021 and 2022, today, Bitcoin is no less, a tool for you to flee a regime. It's no less a tool for you to use, in an instance of domestic abuse or something like that. It's no less, something that, could protect you from a deplatforming or demonetization in some way, right? It's just that we're also doing this thing of, Wall Street is where the capital is. It is where people go to, take the biggest risks and build the biggest companies. And that's why I sort of divided, as I really do think this last election in 2024 was a huge demarcation line in the history of the industry. I think when people look back, they'll draw a pretty bright line and they'll say the first era of Bitcoin, the first age, was 2009 to 2024. And Trump's kind of coming to power and really, within the financial center of the world, validating Bitcoin, agreeing never to sell Bitcoin again, sending that message to the world. That really, I think, is going to demarcate the early age of Bitcoin, where kind of these groups were culturally in charge from this new world where, there's not going to be an internet cafe anymore, right? Like, every cafe is going to have the internet. If you go to a cafe and there's no internet, you're just going to go to another cafe, right? That's the world you're coming to with Bitcoin, where it's normalized and it's just part of the everyday experience.
Yeah. I'm in Southern California, and I grew up in the surfing, skating, snowboarding era, right? And you have these like core brands, and then next thing you know, they're being sold at Macy's, and then they make it to Costco, and then they've sold out. But even though they're still supporting skateboarding or surfing, but I kind of think of it like that. But from a cypherpunk person, most times you would think eventually, we get to this hyper Bitcoinization, or maybe eventually it gets to a global asset. And it's like, well, it doesn't get to a global asset unless everybody adopts it. So it's like, if you chase that thought that you have, or that vision that you have, like, where does that end up? I think about it that way. The other way I think about it is that I think it's important for most people, maybe they don't realize this, but it's like, just because you own more Bitcoin, like Michael Saylor or the US government, doesn't give you control over the network. Which is back what I was saying earlier about some of these POS networks where they have staking And so they can acquire a large amount of the tokens and stake them, and they do get more votes over the network. But Bitcoin doesn't allow that. And so it sort of invalidates that, other than it not being cool, I suppose,
Well, we'll see, right? I still think that from a network component, right, these ETFs and large custodians, they do have a lot of power to define what Bitcoin is at the software level. I mean, again, we'll see if this becomes, a problem at any rate. But again, I do think that, what you're talking about is, Bitcoin's just not going to be counterculture forever, right? It's not going to be the kind of angsty outside of the system thing. I think there was a hope in 2020 and 2021. I think from some large percentage of the community, or maybe a minority percentage, that wanted the kind of global power structure to change, Bitcoin to change that. So, right, maybe they saw Bitcoin as ushering in a world where a country like El Salvador or a country like Bhutan, who was like historically left behind, where people in Africa might sort of use Bitcoin to rise up, right, become more wealthy and become less disempowered by the US-led financial system. I think what's happened as of 2024 with Trump embracing Bitcoin and coming to power is that you're going to see that structure be entrenched. And I understand why people are dissatisfied with it. I would say I would have preferred the other outcome. Do I dislike this outcome? No, I think, the world will be fine. But I do think that, if you had that worldview, then what has happened, I think, is very understandable, right? Where the U.S., I think, if you're talking about the U.S. becoming the world leader in Bitcoin and using that to further the dollar, that's a very different world than a world where, grassroots adoption and adoption in smaller countries, really changes the global power structure and the nature of global superpowers. And I think what you're seeing with Trump, coming to power and embracing Bitcoin is I don't think that future is viable anymore.